This is actually going to be a pretty quick one. Despite being a Gen 2 Pokemon, Furret has only been featured in 9 printed cards in the mainline TCG, which is really just kind of a trend amongst non-legendary Gen 2 Pokemon. They don't get a whole lot of love. But that's okay, because we're going to show Furret some love today. We're going to look at each one of these printed cards, talk about competitive viability, maybe some artwork, maybe even some discussion over what we would like to see from Furret cards in the future. There's not really a lot to talk about with Neo Genesis Furret. Its attacks are pretty basic, really more of like a starter deck Pokemon that gets completely overshadowed by almost everything else that's in the Neo Genesis set. But we gotta talk about this artwork because the card designers spared no expense here. Not only did they just paste the Ken Sugimori official artwork onto a generic background, which was pretty normal for early Pokemon, but they also copied the image, flipped it, and cropped it just to make another Furret in the background, which seems like a completely unnecessary design choice as the foreground Furret does its job. And once you notice that background Furret and how stupid it is, it's all you look at when you see this card, unfortunately. And next up from the Versus series, we have Whitney's Furret, which again is a pretty basic card, not a whole lot to talk about here. At least the artwork had improved from the Neo Genesis one. You know, Furret really hadn't found its calling though. That would soon happen in Aquapolis. When talking about Furret cards, this is one of 2 that always come to mind, and as of now, this may be the quintessential Furret card. You've got the comfy artwork, you've got a decent attack for a 70 HP stage 1, but you've also got a Poke Power that really buys into Furret's overall concept, not just in creature design or perceived personality, but also in-world utility, which is something I love about the TCG when it does it right. You hear me talk about this in every TCG history video where Pokemon tend to develop their own kind of niche as they're printed over and over again, and for Furret, it is the ability to ferret out the cards you need, which translates into a pretty simple search and grab mechanic for the TCG, but it just fits so well with the overall concept of Furret that you gotta love it. Scavenger Hunt was so particularly useful because you could take 2 cards from your hand, shuffle them back into your deck, and pull out any energy card. Not just basic energy, any energy card. If you've played Neo 1, you know how important special energy cards were and how busted this power could be. In fact, I have a separate history video that I just uploaded last week if you want to go check that one out to learn more about how powerful those special energy cards could be. Most notably when paired with Aquapolis Scyther, where grabbing those special metal energies to attach to Scizor for its heavy metal attack was a World Championship level setup. It's such a great utility card, it could really fit into any prominent deck at the time that utilized special energy cards. Which also says a lot about Furret's inclusion in so many decks because the supporters of this era were amazing. You could get a lot done with just those trainer cards, so having Furret be able to do something that those supporters couldn't really meant something. Now let's look at the Team Rocket Returns Furret, which right away, you got the comfy artwork. It's very nice. But then you look down at this first attack, Quick Change, which allows you to take up to 3 cards from your hand and swap them for any 3 cards out of your deck. In retrospect, looking at this card and going, holy shit, that is a lot of search and grab for 1 energy. Surely, every deck of the era was running at least a 1/1 line of Furret, but that wasn't actually the case. Very few decks actually used Furret, because at this point you did have supporter cards that could kind of do the same thing, though not as powerful, didn't require a 2-turn setup, that could actually delay the setup of another active Pokemon. So when it comes right down to it, this Furret wasn't commonly used because Quick Change was an attack rather than a Pokemon power. When it came to utility Pokemon, people much preferred to use a basic Pokemon like Dunsparce, which could use Strike and Run on turn 1 to do the search and grab thing while also retreating back to the bench for safety, giving you the option to use Dunsparce later in the game for a utility or attacking option since you aren't having to discard that energy off of it to retreat it. And the metagame of the time was just way more focused on Pokemon that could search and grab or just have straight up draw power off of Pokemon powers. That way they weren't taking up your active position. So in retrospect, I do consider this Furret to be an amazing card that just didn't get a chance to be amazing in its own format. In Legend Maker, Furret tried to do its best impression of Jungle Wigglytuff, but at a point where doing 60 damage for 3 energy was laughable. When I mentioned earlier that 2 Furret cards always stand out in my mind, this is the second one, the one from Secret Wonders. Not only because Keen Eye and Baton Pass both fit into Furret's theme extremely well, but because I play tested with this card a lot. Mainly because the standard of the metagame at the time was to use Claydol in every single deck, and I hated Claydol. I actually hated the metagame. I always tried to be as rogue as possible. But once again, the reason that Claydol was used over Furret was because it used a Poke Power rather than an attack, so you could use Cosmic Power every turn from the bench. Same thing with Gardevoir's Telepass Pokemon Power. And yet again, unfortunately for Furret, Pokemon with utility attacks were preferably basic Pokemon, just because they were easier to use and took up less space in your deck. Different Furret, same problems. You'd think that Heart Gold, Soul Silver would have been Furret's time to shine, putting the spotlight on those Gen 2 Pokemon once again, but it actually got a pretty big downgrade. So unfortunately, not a lot to say here. The next Furret came to us from XY Flashfire, where the same problems are present. It's a Stage 1 Pokemon that has to use a turn to attack in order to use its Search and Grab ability. If this was a power instead, Buried Treasure Hunt wouldn't be broken by any means, and it would actually make Furret a pretty useful addition to most decks. Instead, placing Buried Treasure Hunt as an attack really lowers it down to like starter deck level. The latest Furret comes to us from Darkness Ablaze, and I really dig the artwork on this one. The Sword and Shield block has been knocking it out of the park with art. And I really like the simplicity of the card too. I think simplicity fits Furret very well. 1 energy, feeling fine, draw 3 cards. I really just wish that Tail Smash didn't require a coin flip. I mean, come on, Pokemon Company, you've got 220 HP basics floating around this game now, but you can't let Furret be a haymaker without flipping a coin? Or maybe that's just me being too hopeful that Furret will get the spotlight again. Which does bring me to the final point of the video, which is how do we improve on Furret? How do we make it viable within the TCG once again? Well, I think what it's ultimately going to take is a regional variant or an evolution similar to what happened with Zigzagoon. So maybe fingers crossed for Scarlet and Violet, or the off chance that we just get a random Furret V that has a search and grab ability rather than an attack. That would solve both of its problems, because then it would be a basic Pokemon and then you would be able to utilize it from your bench. And that's going to be it for this one. Make sure you let me know down in the comments your opinions on Furret, as well as Furret's representation in the TCG. Let me know what TCG history video topics you'd like to see in the future. Social media links down in the description. I'll see you next video. Bye.